Welcome to Darkwake Signal. On this channel, we track classified military records, hidden reports, and unexplained signals lost in the dark. If you're ready to explore the unknown, subscribe, like the video, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Signal received. Let's begin. You know that nagging sense that something's off, but you can't quite grasp what that something is? Like your instincts, honed from years of training and experience, are sitting in mission briefs and telling you that something's not right? This is exactly what I felt seated in the cramped office of Commander Elias Northam aboard the USNS Archer, where a look at a set of coordinates should have meant nothing to me. My name is Chief Diver Luca Barron, and I've spent 22 years inspecting wrecks for the Navy. I've seen vessels torn apart by storms, submarines crushed by pressure, and cargo ships that went down so fast their crews never had time to send a distress call. I've mapped hull numbers in zero visibility, recovered classified equipment from depths that make your bones ache, and documented everything from ammunition caches to human remains. This job has rules, procedures, a logic that makes sense even when you're working in an environment that can kill you 6 different ways before breakfast. But this mission? This one felt different from the moment Northam pulled up the file. Straightforward confirmation dive, he said, tapping the screen with one thick finger. Wreck designate Hotel 73. Documented since 1967. Military transport that went down in a storm. Hulls intact, no environmental hazards, sitting at 240 feet in the western edge of the triangle. I studied the grainy sonar image. The wreck looked clean, settled evenly on a sandy bottom, its superstructure mostly collapsed but the main hull still recognizable. Standard stuff for a vessel that had been down for over 50 years. Why now? I asked. We've had this logged for decades. What's changed? Northam shifted in his chair and I caught it. That tiny hesitation. That fraction of a second where he decided what to tell me and what to keep to himself. Routine verification, he said. Triangle wrecks get flagged for periodic confirmation. Make sure coordinates still match, structure hasn't shifted, no salvage activity. Standard protocol. Except it wasn't standard. I'd been doing this long enough to know which wrecks got attention and which ones sat forgotten in the archives. A documented military transport with no strategic value, no recoverable cargo, and coordinates that hadn't changed in 50 years? That doesn't suddenly jump to the top of anyone's priority list without a reason. But you don't question a commander. Not when you've got 22 years in and a pension waiting on the other side. So I nodded and said, "Who's diving with me?" Henrik Vale on penetration, Marcus Elroy handling lines and documentation. Lieutenant Whitaker will have surface command. Henrik was good. Careful, methodical, someone who'd been inside more wrecks than most people had seen pictures of. Marcus was younger, only 5 years in, but he had steady hands and followed procedures like they were scripture. Whitaker, though. Whitaker was the kind of officer who always knew more than he said. The kind who'd smile and nod while feeding you half-truths. This was going to be interesting. We assembled on deck 6 hours later, the Atlantic stretching out in every direction, flat and gray under an overcast sky. The Bermuda Triangle doesn't look mysterious. It doesn't feel haunted. It's just ocean same as anywhere else. But there's something about knowing where you are, about the history of this particular stretch of water, that makes you pay attention to details you might otherwise miss. Henrik was already geared up, checking his primary and backup regulators with the kind of focused intensity that meant he was running through every possible failure scenario in his head. Marcus had the dive slate ready, camera equipment tested, lines coiled and inspected. Depth is 240 feet, I said, gathering the team. That puts us in deco territory, so we're watching bottom time carefully. Standard wreck protocol. I go in first, establish entry point, Henrik follows for penetration if the structure's sound. Marcus, you stay on the line, document externals, and keep communication clear. Expected bottom time? Henrik asked. 20 minutes max. We're not doing full mapping, just confirmation. Hull number verification, structural assessment, photo documentation. Quick and clean. What I didn't mention, what had been bothering me since the briefing, was that according to the file, this exact dive had been completed 3 years ago. Same parameters, same objectives. The report had been filed, approved, and archived. So why were we doing it again? The descent line went over the side and we followed it down. The water was murky near the surface, visibility maybe 30 feet, but it cleared as we dropped deeper. At 100 feet, the temperature dropped sharply, and I could feel the weight of the water pressing against my dry suit. At 200 feet, the light had faded to a dim twilight, and I clicked on my primary torch. The wreck appeared below us like a ghost materializing from fog. Hotel 73, exactly where the coordinates said it would be. The hull was tilted slightly to starboard, covered in marine growth and silt, but otherwise intact. I could make out the cargo hatches, the remains of the superstructure, even the anchor chain still attached to the bow. We touched down on the sandy bottom, and I took a moment to orient myself. Everything matched the documentation. Hull dimensions, position, angle of rest. This was definitely the right wreck. I signaled Henrik and we approached the main hull. The plan was to locate the hull number, stamped into the metal near the bow, photograph it, and confirm identity. Simple. Except when I reached the location where the number should have been, I found something that made my blood run cold. Fresh cut marks. Not corrosion. Not damage from the sinking. Clean, precise cuts in the metal, exposing bright steel underneath. Someone had used a cutting torch here, and recently. The exposed metal hadn't had time to rust, hadn't accumulated the same marine growth as the surrounding hull. I directed my light along the hull and found more. A section near the forward cargo hatch had been carefully cut away and then resecured with modern cable ties. Not rope that would degrade. Not chains that would corrode. Plastic-coated steel cable, the kind you could buy at any marine supply store. Henrik saw it too. Through his mask, I could see his eyes widen. He pointed to the hatch, then made the hand signal for recent activity. I checked my dive computer. We'd been down 8 minutes. I needed to make a decision. Protocol said we should surface immediately, report the anomaly, and wait for orders. But protocol also said that if we surfaced without completing the objective, Northam would just send us back down. And I wanted to know what the hell was going on. I signaled to Henrik, proceed with caution. We moved to the cargo hatch. Someone had cut through the corroded locking mechanism and rigged a new opening system. It was crude but effective. A simple lever arrangement that would let you open the hatch from outside without explosives or hydraulics. I tested it gently, and the hatch swung open with surprising ease. Inside was darkness. I directed my light through the opening and saw something that shouldn't exist. The cargo hold had been cleared. Not by time and current and marine life, but deliberately cleared. Equipment that should have been rusted into unrecognizable lumps had been cut apart and moved, stacked neatly along the bulkheads. And running through the center of the hold, stretching toward the aft section of the ship, was a guideline. Modern synthetic rope, bright yellow, tied off at regular intervals. Someone had been working inside this wreck. Recently. Systematically. I checked my computer again. 12 minutes down. We were approaching our limit, but I had to see more. Had to understand what I was looking at. I entered the hold, following the guideline. Henrik came with me, his light sweeping the space, documenting everything. The hold was maybe 40 feet long, and the guideline led straight through it to a bulkhead door that should have been sealed shut. Instead, it was propped open and the guideline continued through. We reached the door and I peered into the next compartment. This had been crew quarters, bunks still visible along the walls, but like the hold, it had been systematically cleared. Personal effects that should have been scattered across the floor were gone. The space was empty except for more guidelines, more evidence of recent, deliberate activity. And then I saw something that made my chest tighten. On the far bulkhead, written in what looked like grease pencil, was a date, April 15, 22. April 15, 2022. less than 3 years ago. But according to the official records, this wreck had been inspected in 2022, and the report said it was undisturbed. Natural degradation only. No evidence of salvage activity. No unauthorized entry. Someone had lied. Either the inspection team had missed all of this, which seemed impossible, or they'd seen it and deliberately omitted it from their report. Or worse, they'd been the ones doing the work. My dive computer started beeping. 15 minutes. We were into deco obligation now. Any longer and we'd need to make mandatory decompression stops on the way up. I signaled Henrik, surface. We needed to report this. Needed to get answers. We backed out of the wreck, following our entry path, and I was just clearing the cargo hatch when I saw something that stopped me cold. Another guideline, different color, this one red, running from the wreck toward the east, stretching out into the murky distance beyond our lights. Someone had rigged a trail line, a navigation rope leading from this wreck to something else. I wanted to follow it, wanted to see where it led. But my computer was screaming at me now, and Henrik was pulling on my arm, pointing up. We were out of time. We ascended slowly, making our required stops at 30 feet and 15 feet, hanging in the current while our bodies off-gassed nitrogen. I used the time to think, to piece together what we'd seen. This wreck had been accessed recently. Not by salvage operators. They would have stripped it clean, taken anything valuable. This was different. Methodical. Someone clearing spaces, creating access routes, leaving navigation lines. Like they were preparing the wreck for something, or using it as a waypoint. And the official inspection report from 3 years ago had claimed the wreck was undisturbed. We broke surface to find Lieutenant Whitaker waiting at the dive platform, his face carefully neutral. Too neutral. "How'd it go?" he asked as we handed up our cameras. "We need to talk to the commander," I said, pulling off my mask. "Right now." Whitaker's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not surprise. Not concern. Something closer to resignation. "I'll let him know you're coming up," he said, and turned away before I could say anything else. Henrik and I stripped out of our gear in silence. Marcus was reviewing the camera footage, his face getting paler with each image. "Chief," he said quietly, "this is going to cause problems, isn't it?" Commander Northam's office felt smaller the second time around. Or maybe it was the tension that made the walls seem closer, the air thicker. He sat behind his desk, hands folded, watching the footage on his monitor with an expression that gave away absolutely nothing. Henrik and I stood there, still damp from the dive, while Marcus operated the playback. The images were clear enough. Fresh-cut marks. Modern rope lines. Cable ties. That date written on the bulkhead. The red guideline stretching into darkness. When the footage ended, Northam sat back and was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Explain what I'm looking at." "Someone's been inside that wreck," I said. "Recently. Within the last 3 years, maybe more recently than that. They've cleared compartments, rigged access points, established navigation lines. This isn't casual salvage work. This is systematic preparation." Preparation for what? I don't know. But whatever it is, it's not in the official record. The 2022 inspection report says the wreck was undisturbed. Northam's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You read the 2022 report?" "I read all the reports before a dive. Standard procedure." He turned to his computer, typed something, and his screen went blank for a moment before displaying a message I couldn't read from where I stood. But I saw his expression change. Saw the way his shoulders stiffened. "The 2022 report has been reclassified," he said quietly. The room went silent. Henrik shifted beside me. Marcus stopped breathing. "Reclassified when?" I asked. "Approximately 4 hours ago." 4 hours. Right around the time we'd been starting our dive. Someone had known we were going down there and had moved to lock down the previous inspection report before we could compare notes. "Commander," I said carefully, "what the hell is going on?" Northam stood up, walked to the small porthole, and stared out at the gray Atlantic. When he spoke, his voice was different, tired, like he'd been carrying something heavy for too long. "I'm going to tell you something that doesn't leave this room," he said. "And before I do, I need you to understand that I'm as much in the dark as you are. I get orders. I follow them. I ask questions when I'm allowed to, and I keep my mouth shut when I'm not. Sir, that wreck," he continued, cutting me off, "has been inspected 7 times in the last 15 years. 7. Each time by a different team. Each time with the same objective: confirm identity, document condition, report any anomalies." "And?" Henrik asked. "And each time the report gets filed, approved, and then quietly reclassified. The inspection teams get reassigned, scattered to different posts, different operations. Within 6 months, none of them are working together anymore." My skin prickled. "You're saying this is deliberate? Someone's running regular inspections and then burying the results?" "I'm saying I've been ordered to send dive teams to that wreck on a schedule that makes no tactical sense, and every time I do, the paperwork disappears into classification levels above my clearance." "What about the teams?" I asked. "The divers who went down? They must have seen the same things we saw. The fresh work, the guidelines, the evidence of recent activity. What did they report?" Northam turned from the window, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely troubled. "That's the thing, Chief. According to the official records, none of them reported anything unusual. Each team came back with the same basic findings. Wreck is where it should be, structural degradation consistent with age, no salvage activity detected." "That's impossible," Henrik said. "We saw." "I know what you saw," Northam interrupted. "I'm looking at the footage. But I'm telling you that 7 previous teams supposedly saw nothing. Either they were all incompetent, which I don't believe, or they were told to file clean reports and keep quiet. The implication settled over us like a weight. Someone was using that wreck. Using it for something important enough to require regular monitoring, important enough to classify inspection reports, important enough to scatter dive teams before they could compare notes or ask questions. The red guideline," I said. "It was leading away from the wreck, heading east. If someone's using Hotel 73 as a waypoint, what are they navigating to?" Northam pulled up a chart on his monitor. The Bermuda Triangle, marked with known wrecks, hazard zones, restricted areas. He zoomed in on our current location and traced a line east from Hotel 73's coordinates. The line passed through empty ocean for about 3 miles, then intersected with another marked wreck. Designate Papatunine, a submarine. Lost in 1968 under circumstances the file listed as classified. "There's your answer," Northam said quietly. I stared at the chart. 2 wrecks connected by an underwater guideline, both inside the triangle, both with classified histories. And someone was maintaining regular access to at least one of them. "We need to follow that line," I said. "Absolutely not." Northam's response was immediate and firm. "Your mission was to confirm Hotel 73. You've done that. We report our findings and wait for orders." "Commander, with respect, waiting for orders means giving whoever's running this operation time to clean up. That guideline could be gone by tomorrow. Any evidence we saw could disappear. Then it disappears. Chief, you're talking about making an unauthorized dive to a classified submarine wreck based on finding a rope. Do you understand what kind of shitstorm that would create? Do you understand what kind of shitstorm we're already in?" I shot back. 7 inspection teams. 7 buried reports. Someone's been working these wrecks for over a decade, and the Navy's either complicit or completely compromised. Either way, following procedure hasn't gotten anyone answers. Northam's face darkened. "Watch yourself, Chief." "I'm just saying what we're all thinking, sir. Something's wrong here. Something big. And if we surface without getting the full picture, we'll just end up like all those other teams, reassigned, separated, silenced." The silence that followed was heavy. Henrik was watching me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. 22 years of following orders, of trusting the chain of command, and here I was advocating for going rogue. But something about this situation had gotten under my skin. The methodical clearing of that wreck. The fresh work. The date on the bulkhead. Someone had been down there recently, doing something they didn't want documented. And the Navy had been helping them cover it up for years. If we go down again, Henrik said quietly, we need a different mission profile. Deeper, longer bottom time. Following that guideline could take us beyond our deco limits. Then we planned for it, I said. Extended decompression, proper gas mix, full safety protocols. But we go tonight. Before anyone realizes what we found. Northam looked at each of us in turn. I could see the conflict playing across his face. He was a by-the-book officer, someone who'd built his career on following procedures and trusting the system. But he was also someone who'd been used. Sent to inspect a wreck 7 times under false pretenses, had his reports buried, his team scattered. If I authorize this, he said slowly, and it goes wrong, my career is over. All our careers are over. If you don't authorize it, I replied, we'll never know the truth. And 3 years from now, some other dive team will be standing in this office, looking at the same footage, asking the same questions. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to his computer and started typing. You've got 12 hours to prep, he said without looking up. Dive commences at 0200. We'll be on minimal crew, just essential personnel. Whitaker will have surface command, but I'm limiting his access to communications. If something goes wrong down there, I want time to make decisions before word gets out. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet, Chief. You might just have talked us all into the end of our careers. Or worse. We spent the next 8 hours preparing. Extended decompression meant we needed Trimix, a breathing gas mixture that would reduce nitrogen narcosis at depth. If that guideline led deeper than 240 feet, standard air could get us killed. We also rigged emergency bottles, redundant regulators, and additional lighting. If we were going to penetrate a second wreck, possibly a submarine, we needed to be ready for tight spaces and zero visibility. Marcus pulled every available chart and sonar image of Papa 29. The submarine had been a diesel-electric boat, about 300 feet long, lost with all hands. The official story was an accident during a training exercise. Flooded compartments, catastrophic power failure, rapid descent beyond crush depth. But the file was sparse on details and entire sections were redacted. Estimated depth? I asked. Chart shows the bottom there at 340 feet. If the sub settled level, we could be looking at a hull depth of 320 to 330. That was deep. Not impossible, but deep enough that everything got more complicated. Gas consumption increased, narcosis risk went up, and deco time extended significantly. How long can we stay down? Henrik asked. I did the calculations. With Trimix, maybe 25 minutes at 330 feet. But that commits us to almost 2 hours of decompression. We'll be hanging on the line for a long time. What if the guideline goes inside the sub? That was the question I'd been avoiding. Penetrating a wreck at 330 feet was technical diving at its most dangerous. Tight spaces, silt-out potential, entanglement hazards. Every mistake magnified by depth and pressure. Then we make the call when we get there, I said. If it looks too risky, we surface and report what we found. But my gut tells me that whatever's at the end of that line is important enough to risk going after. Your gut could get us killed, Henrik said. Yeah, it could. At 0145, we were geared up and ready. The deck was quiet, most of the crew asleep or confined to quarters under Northam's orders. Only Whitaker was topside, and he watched us with an expression I couldn't read. He knew something was off about this dive, but Northam had kept him out of the loop on our full intentions. Straight confirmation dive, Whitaker said as we moved to the platform. Follow the guidelines in the briefing, stay in communication, Surface if anything looks wrong. Understood, Lieutenant, I said, knowing that the moment we were underwater, his guidelines wouldn't mean much. The water was black under the night sky. No moon, no stars, just infinite darkness above and below. We descended the line in silence, our lights cutting narrow tunnels through the murk. At 100 feet, I could feel the weight of what we were doing settling over me. This was the point of no return. Once we passed 200 feet, we were committed to the full decompression schedule. There'd be no quick ascent, no emergency bolt to the surface. At 240 feet, Hotel 73 appeared below us, exactly as we'd left it. We touched down, oriented ourselves, and I pointed my light toward the eastern side of the wreck where we'd seen the red guideline. It was still there, still leading off into darkness. I checked my computer, confirmed our gas mix and bottom time, and signaled Henrik, "Follow me." We left the wreck behind and followed the line into open water. Swimming at depth is different from shallow diving. Every movement feels heavier, more deliberate. The darkness presses in from all sides, and your light can only reach so far before it's swallowed completely. You have to trust the line, trust your instruments, trust that the person swimming beside you is still there even when you can't see them clearly. The line ran straight for what felt like forever. My computer counted off the distance: 500 feet, 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet. We were crossing open ocean floor, our lights occasionally catching patches of sand or scattered debris, but mostly just emptiness. And then, at just over 2,000 feet from Hotel 73, something massive appeared in our lights. Papa 29. The submarine was enormous, dwarfing anything I'd ever dived. It sat upright on the bottom, bow tilted slightly down, hull surprisingly intact. No catastrophic breach, no crushed compartments. It looked like it had simply settled here and gone to sleep. The red guideline ran straight to the sub's conning tower, where it was secured to a broken antenna mount. From there, another line, this one white, led down the side of the hull toward what looked like a hatch. We approached carefully, and I could see immediately that someone had been here. The hatch showed fresh tool marks, and the locking mechanism had been modified with a simple external release. The same setup we'd seen at Hotel 73. Someone had made it easy to get inside. I checked my computer. We'd been down 18 minutes. That gave us maybe 7 more at this depth before we had to start ascending. Not much time. I looked at Henrik. He was staring at the hatch, and I could see the same question in his eyes that was running through my mind. Do we go in? Every regulation, every safety protocol said no. But we'd come this far. Had broken enough rules already. And something told me that whatever answers we were looking for, they were inside this submarine. I reached for the hatch and pulled the release. It opened with surprising ease, revealing darkness beyond. I directed my light inside and saw a narrow passage leading down. The white guideline continued through it. I signaled to Henrik, "Stay close." And then I entered the submarine. The passage was tight, barely wide enough for a diver in full gear. I had to angle my shoulders and pull myself through using the guideline, my tank scraping against metal overhead. Henrik followed close behind, his light adding to mine, creating strange shadows that danced across the corroded walls. We emerged into what had been the control room. Equipment hung from the overhead, cables dangled like vines, and everything was covered in a thick layer of silt that our entry disturbed, reducing visibility to near zero. I waited, hovering motionless while the silt settled, and when it finally cleared enough to see, I understood why this wreck had been classified for over 50 years. The control room hadn't flooded during a training accident. It had been deliberately scuttled. I could see the evidence everywhere. Valves that had been manually opened. Hatches that had been sealed from the inside. Equipment that had been systematically destroyed, not by water pressure or impact, but by tools. Someone had taken this submarine apart from within before sending it to the bottom. The white guideline ran through the control room and disappeared through another hatch leading aft. I checked my computer. 21 minutes down. We were pushing our limits now, but I had to see where that line led. We moved through the sub, passing through compartments that told the same story. Deliberate destruction. Methodical dismantling. This wasn't a crew trying to survive a sinking ship. This was a crew following orders to make sure certain things never surfaced. In what had been the crew quarters, I found something that made my blood run cold. Bunks with bodies still in them. 7 skeletons, still wearing the remnants of their uniforms, lying peacefully as if they'd simply gone to sleep and never woken up. No signs of struggle. No indication they'd been trying to escape. They just stayed in their bunks while the water rose around them. Henrik grabbed my arm and pointed. On the bulkhead beside one of the bunks, someone had scratched a message into the metal. The letters were crude but clear. They said it would be quick. They lied. I felt sick. These men had known. Had understood they were going to die. Had been told it would be painless, and had discovered the truth too late to do anything about it. The guideline led us deeper, through the engineering spaces, past machinery that had been deliberately disabled, through corridors that felt like a tomb. And finally, we reached what we'd been looking for. The aft torpedo room had been converted into something else. All the torpedo tubes had been removed, and in their place was a workspace. Waterproof equipment lockers lined the walls, and in the center of the room, secured to the deck with modern mounting brackets, was a large metal container, about the size of a footlocker, sealed with heavy latches and marked with stenciled letters, authorized personnel only. This was what someone had been coming here for. This was what the guidelines had been leading to. Whatever was in that container was important enough to kill a submarine crew, important enough to run covert operations in the Triangle for over a decade, important enough to bury inspection reports and scatter dive teams. I reached for the latches, but Henrik grabbed my wrist and pointed at his computer. 24 minutes. We were out of time. If we didn't start ascending immediately, we'd blow past our deco limits and risk serious injury or death. But we were so close. I could feel the weight of that container, the importance of whatever it held. This might be our only chance. If we surfaced now, reported what we'd found, Northam would be forced to escalate through official channels. And whoever was running this operation would have time to clean house, remove the container, eliminate the evidence. I made a decision that I'd probably regret for the rest of my life. I popped the latches. The container opened to reveal documents. Lots of them. Sealed in waterproof bags, preserved against decades of saltwater exposure. I pulled out the top bag and held it up to my light. Through the transparent plastic, I could see what looked like operational orders. Dated 1968. Marked top secret. I didn't have time to read them. Didn't have time to understand what I was looking at. But I could see enough to know this was significant. These documents weren't just classified. They were evidence of something the Navy had buried along with this submarine and its crew. Henrik was pulling on me now, urgent, his computer beeping warnings. We had to go. Had to start the ascent now or face serious consequences. I grabbed 3 document bags, just enough to fit in my vest pockets, and sealed the container. If someone came back and found it disturbed, they'd know we'd been here. But I was past caring about covering our tracks. We had evidence now. Proof that something deeply wrong had been happening in these waters for over 50 years. We reversed course, swimming back through the submarine's corridors, past the dead crew, through the control room and out the hatch. The ascent line from Hotel 73 was 2,000 feet away across open ocean floor, and we swam for it with single-minded focus, ignoring our screaming computers, ignoring the nitrogen building up in our tissues, focusing only on reaching that line and starting the long climb back to the surface. We reached Hotel 73 at 28 minutes bottom time. 4 minutes over our planned limit. That meant extended deco, meant spending even more time hanging in the water while our bodies processed the gas mix. But we were alive and we had the documents. The ascent took 3 hours. 3 hours of hanging at various depths, watching our computers count down the required time, unable to communicate anything more than basic hand signals. 3 hours of thinking about what we'd seen. The deliberately scuttled submarine. The crew left to die. The documents someone had hidden away and then maintained access to for decades. By the time we broke surface, the sky was starting to lighten with pre-dawn gray. Whitaker was waiting at the platform, and one look at his face told me everything I needed to know. Someone had been monitoring our dive times. Someone had noticed we'd been down far longer than a simple confirmation dive should take. "Where the hell have you been?" Whitaker demanded as we handed up our gear. "You were supposed to be down for 40 minutes maximum. You've been gone for over 4 hours. "We followed a lead," I said, hauling myself onto the platform. "We found something." "Found what?" I pulled out the document bags and held them up. Whitaker's face went pale. "Where did you get those?" "Papatunan. The submarine wrecked 3 miles east of Hotel 73. Someone's been running a guideline between the two wrecks, maintaining access to both. There's a container inside the sub full of documents. We took samples." Whitaker stared at the bags like they were radioactive. "You entered a classified wreck. You removed classified materials. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yeah," I said. "I found out why 7 dive teams got their reports buried. I found out why this operation has been running for over a decade. And I'm pretty sure I found out why a submarine crew died down there." "Give me those documents. Right now." "No." The word hung in the air between us. Henrik had climbed out of the water and was standing beside me, silent support. Marcus was watching from the deck, camera in hand, documenting everything. "That's an order, Chief," Whitaker said, his voice low and dangerous. "Then you'll have to take them," I replied, "because I'm not handing over evidence of a cover-up to someone who's probably part of it." Whitaker's hand moved toward the sidearm on his hip, and for a moment I thought he might actually pull it. But then Commander Northam's voice cut through the tension. "Stand down, Lieutenant." Northam was walking across the deck, fully dressed despite the early hour. He'd been awake, waiting for us, knowing this moment would come. "Commander," Whitaker started, but Northam cut him off. I said, "Stand down." "Chief Baron Henrik, my office." "Now, bring the documents." We followed him below deck, leaving Whitaker on the platform looking like a man whose world was falling apart. Maybe it was. Maybe all our worlds were. Northam closed the office door and turned to face us. "Tell me everything." So we did. The guideline leading to Papatunan. The submarine sitting intact on the bottom. The evidence of deliberate scuttling. The crew dead in their bunks. The message scratched into the bulkhead. The container in the torpedo room. The documents. When we finished, Northam was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Open them." I unsealed the first bag and pulled out the documents inside. The paper was old but well preserved, and the words were still clearly legible. It was a set of operational orders, dated March 1968, addressed to the commanding officer of Papatunan. The orders were chilling in their simplicity. The submarine was to proceed to specified coordinates in the Bermuda Triangle. Once on station, the crew was to transfer sensitive documents and equipment to a prepositioned container in the torpedo room. The submarine was then to be scuttled using specific procedures designed to make it look like an accident. Most of the crew would evacuate via a rendezvous with a surface vessel, but 7 volunteers would remain aboard to ensure the scuttle was completed. Those 7 volunteers would be sedated and secured in their bunks before the flooding began. They would die painlessly in their sleep, or so the orders promised. "Jesus Christ," Northam whispered. I opened the second bag. More documents. These were technical specifications for something called Project Deepwatch, a surveillance system that had apparently been installed throughout the Triangle in the 1960s. Underwater sensors, monitoring equipment, communication relays. All powered by some kind of experimental system that the documents didn't fully explain. The third bag contained maintenance logs. Recent ones. Dated within the last 5 years. Someone had been regularly servicing the Deepwatch equipment, using the wrecks as access points, maintaining a surveillance network that officially didn't exist. This is why they've been running the inspections, Henrik said. Not to monitor the wrecks, to maintain the equipment. And everyone who's gone down there has been briefed to file clean reports, I added. Keep the wrecks looking abandoned while someone uses them as cover for accessing the surveillance network. Northam sat down heavily. This is beyond my clearance. Way beyond. If even half of what these documents say is true, we're looking at a covert operation that's been running for over 50 years. One that involved killing 7 sailors and burying a submarine to maintain cover. What do we do? Henrik asked. We report it, Northam said. We go through proper channels. We do that and these documents disappear, I interrupted. Just like the inspection reports. Just like Papa 29. Whoever's running Deep Watch has been doing it long enough to have people at every level of the chain of command. We report this and we'll be the ones who get buried. So what do you suggest, Chief? We go rogue? We take this to the press? I don't know. But I know that 7 men died to keep this secret, and someone's been maintaining that cover-up for decades. I'm not going to be part of continuing it. The room fell silent. Outside, I could hear the ship's engines, the sound of crews starting their morning routines. Normal sounds from a normal day. Except nothing about this situation was normal. Northam stood and walked to his safe. He opened it, pulled out a folder, and handed it to me. Before we deployed on this mission, I was given sealed orders. I was told not to open them unless certain specific conditions were met. I think we just met those conditions. I opened the folder and found a single sheet of paper inside. The message was brief. If dive team discovers evidence of ongoing operations at Papa 29, immediately secure all personnel and await further instructions. Do not allow any communication with external parties. Do not file reports through normal channels. Transportation will arrive within 24 hours. The message was signed by someone I'd never heard of, with credentials that suggested they operated at levels of classification I didn't know existed. They knew, Henrik said. They knew we'd find it. Not knew, Northam corrected. They were prepared for the possibility. Which means this isn't the first time a dive team has discovered the truth. And I'm willing to bet those other teams never got a chance to share what they found. A chill ran down my spine. You think they were silenced? I think they were reassigned, separated, and probably monitored for the rest of their careers to make sure they kept quiet. And if we follow these orders, if we wait for that transportation to arrive, the same thing will happen to us. So we run, I said. We can't run from the Navy, Chief. We're in the middle of the Atlantic on a Navy vessel. Where exactly would we go? He was right, of course. We were trapped. Even if we could somehow get to shore, we'd be deserters. Our lives would be over, and the evidence we'd gathered would be dismissed as the desperate fabrication of men trying to avoid consequences. Then we make copies, Henrik said suddenly. We document everything we found, make multiple copies, and distribute them to people we trust. Create a dead man's switch. If we disappear, if we get reassigned and silenced, the information goes public. Northam considered this. That's conspiracy. That's treason, potentially. That's insurance, I corrected. Against being disappeared like those other dive teams. The commander looked at the documents spread across his desk, at the evidence of a 50-year cover-up, at the proof that 7 sailors had been murdered to maintain operational security. Then he looked at us. Marcus has been filming everything? He asked. Everything, I confirmed. Then we make copies. We document every detail. We photograph these documents, record our statements, and create a package that tells the whole story. And then, he paused, making a decision that I knew would change all our lives. Then we follow the orders in this folder. We secure all personnel. We wait for transportation. And we see who shows up. Commander. But, he continued, talking over my objection, we also make sure that if anything happens to us, if we get silenced or disappeared, someone outside the Navy knows the truth. We give them everything with instructions to go public if we don't check in regularly. It was risky. It could still blow up in our faces. But it was better than running, better than waiting passively to be neutralized. We spent the next 6 hours creating our insurance policy. Marcus's footage was copied to multiple drives. The documents were photographed from every angle. We recorded detailed statements describing everything we'd found, everything we'd seen. Northam added his own account, including the sealed orders and the history of buried inspection reports. By noon, we had 5 complete packages. Each one contained enough information to expose Project Deepwatch and the murder of Papa 29's crew. Northam had contacts, people he'd served with who'd retired to civilian life, people who had no reason to participate in a cover-up. He sent the packages through channels that couldn't be easily monitored, with instructions that were clear. If we didn't check in every week, go public with everything. Then we waited. The transportation arrived 18 hours later. Not a Navy vessel. A civilian salvage ship that appeared on our radar without warning and pulled alongside the Archer without bothering to request permission. Men in unmarked uniforms came aboard, and their leader, a man who introduced himself only as Mr. Cross, went directly to Northam's office without needing directions. Henrik, Marcus, and I were confined to quarters, but I could hear raised voices through the bulkhead. Northam arguing. Cross responding with a tone that suggested he was used to getting his way. The conversation went on for over an hour. When our door finally opened, it was Cross standing there. He was maybe 50 feet, with eyes that suggested he'd seen things he'd never talk about. Behind him were 2 of his men, armed but not threatening. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice surprisingly pleasant, "we need to have a conversation." We were brought to the wardroom where Northam was already waiting, his face carefully neutral. Cross sat at the head of the table and gestured for us to sit. "First," he said, "let me congratulate you on your diving skills. Following that guideline at night, penetrating Papa 29, retrieving documents from a container that was designed to be inaccessible, all very impressive." "Who are you?" I asked. "I'm someone who's been maintaining Project Deepwatch for the last 12 years. Before that, it was someone else. Before that, someone else. The project has been running continuously since 1967, and it's been remarkably successful at staying off the books." "You killed 7 sailors," Henrik said. "I didn't kill anyone. That happened 20 years before I was born. But yes, 7 men volunteered to give their lives for national security, and their sacrifice has been honored through our continued operation of the system they helped protect." "Volunteered," I said. "They were sedated and drowned." Cross's expression didn't change. The alternative was to let them live with knowledge that couldn't be allowed to spread. The sedation was a kindness, believe it or not. And their service has saved countless lives over the decades. The surveillance network they helped establish has detected foreign submarines, tracked enemy movements, and provided intelligence that prevented conflicts from escalating. That doesn't justify murder, doesn't it? 7 lives versus potentially thousands? That's the math we deal with in intelligence work. It's not pretty, but it's necessary. Northam leaned forward. "What happens now? We get reassigned? Monitored? Silenced?" Cross smiled. "Actually, Commander, I'm here to offer you a choice. You and your team have demonstrated exactly the kind of initiative and discretion that Project Deepwatch needs. The current maintenance team is aging out, and we've been looking for replacements. People who can dive deep, think independently, and understand the importance of operational security." The room went silent. "You're offering us a job," I said slowly. "I'm offering you a purpose. Continue serving your country in a way that matters. Maintain a system that's been protecting American interests for over 50 years. Get paid significantly more than Navy salary, operate with minimal oversight, and know that the work you're doing makes a real difference. And if we say no?" Cross's smile faded slightly. "Then you go back to your regular duties. You never speak of what you found." You file a report saying Hotel 73 was confirmed as documented, no anomalies detected, and you live with the knowledge that you walked away from something important. What about the documents we took? Henrik asked. What documents? We recovered the container from Papa 29 earlier this morning. It was fully sealed, completely undisturbed. Whatever you think you took must have been water damage playing tricks on your eyes at depth. He was good. I had to give him that. He was offering us a carrot while making it clear that the stick was always available. Accept the job, become part of the operation, get paid and get purpose. Refuse and spend the rest of our careers wondering if someone was watching, waiting for us to become a problem that needed solving. We need time to think, Northam said. You have 24 hours, Cross replied. My ship leaves tomorrow at noon. Anyone who wants to join us should be packed and ready. Anyone who doesn't should be prepared to forget this conversation ever happened. He stood and his men followed suit. At the door, he paused and looked back at us. For what it's worth, gentlemen, I hope you accept. The work we do matters. And we could use people with your integrity. Even if that integrity led you to steal classified documents and plan to blackmail your way into safety. After they left, the four of us sat in silence for a long time. He knew, Marcus finally said, about the packages we sent, the insurance policy. He knew. Of course he knew, Northam said tiredly. These people have been running covert operations for 50 years. You think they can't monitor a few data transfers from a ship in the middle of the Atlantic? So what do we do? Henrik asked. I looked at the three men I'd been diving with, the three men who'd followed me into a classified wreck and helped expose a 50-year cover-up. We'd come looking for answers and we'd found them. Now we had to decide what those answers were worth. We have 24 hours to decide, I said. I suggest we use them. None of us slept that night. We talked through every angle, every option, every possible consequence. By morning, we'd each made our decision. When Cross's ship prepared to depart at noon, three of us were standing on deck with our gear packed. Marcus had chosen to stay behind, to return to regular Navy duty, to forget what we'd found. I couldn't blame him. He was young, had his whole career ahead of him, and didn't need the weight of this knowledge. But Northam, Henrik, and I climbed aboard that civilian salvage ship, joining the crew that maintained Project Deepwatch, becoming part of a system that had killed 7 men to protect its secrets. We told ourselves we were doing it to keep those secrets from being buried again, to honor the sacrifice of Papa 29's crew by ensuring their deaths meant something. We told ourselves we were serving our country, protecting intelligence assets, making a difference. But late at night, when I'm alone with my thoughts, I wonder if we just chose the easier path. The path where we got paid to dive and didn't have to live looking over our shoulders. The path where we became part of the cover-up instead of fighting against it. I still dive those wrecks. Hotel 73, Papa 29, others that I'm not allowed to name. I maintain the equipment. I file the reports. I train new divers when the old ones retire. And I keep the secret just like 7 sailors did before they were sedated and drowned in the name of national security. The Bermuda Triangle doesn't hold any mysteries. Not really. Just old wrecks and older secrets, maintained by people who understand that some truths are too dangerous to surface. And every time I descend that line into darkness, I think about the choice we made. The choice between exposure and complicity, between integrity and survival. I'm still not sure we chose right, but I'm alive. We're all alive. And the secrets stay buried 300 feet down, in the cold and the dark where they've always been.